So you guys wanted to understand how historian Ilan Pappe went from like embracing Zionism to being actively opposed to it.
Actively opposing it, yeah.
We've got a fascinating interview with him.
Yeah, this is really a fascinating interview.
That we're going to kind of use to unpack that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that whole journey.
I think a lot of times people...
And figure out...
Think about changing political views or something. You're kind of swayed by current events or something. But in his case...
Yeah.
It was really a long process driven by historical research.
Absolutely. And he starts really early. Like, he was born in 1954 in Haifa.
Right.
Grew up completely immersed in Zionist ideals.
Which makes sense, given the context, right? Like, Israel's founding and all of that.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But even from early on, he mentions this passion for primary sources.
Right.
Which I think is really interesting. It kind of hints at the scholar he would become. Right, someone who's not just content with sort of the surface level understanding or whatever is being presented to him.
Yeah.
He really wants to go back to like the original documents.
Right.
The archival materials.
Yeah, and that's what leads him to some unsettling discoveries, right?
Absolutely.
Because he's not just taking things at face value.
Right, and it's interesting how he talks about, even in university, his first encounters with Palestinians.
Yes.
He's starting to feel like there's this whole set of perspectives and experiences that have just been completely left out of his education.
Yeah, and that's a powerful realization.
Right, when you start to feel like, wait a second.
Yeah.
I've been told a very particular story here.
Yeah.
And there's a whole other side to this.
A whole other side to this. Yeah.
And that really intensifies, I think, during his doctoral studies.
Right.
Which he does in England.
Right, in England, yeah.
So imagine, for the first time, he's surrounded by Palestinian and Arab scholars, able to kind of engage with them freely in a way that he didn't feel he could in Israel.
Yeah, that's got to be huge.
Eye-opening, right?
Oh, yeah. Like, it's almost like stepping out of a bubble and seeing the world with fresh eyes.
Right, yeah. And so that outside perspective is what really kind of pushes him into a deeper exploration of the conflict, and specifically the events of 1948.
Yeah. This is really where things start to take a turn.
Right, the Nakba.
Right, the Nakba, meaning a catastrophe in Arabic.
Yeah, in Arabic. Yeah.
And this is where his research really starts to challenge, I think, that dominant narrative surrounding the creation of Israel.
So up to this point, he's kind of accepted the idea that...
I think so, yeah, like many Israelis.
Yeah.
He accepted this idea that Palestinians fled.
Right.
Or were told to leave by Arab leaders.
Right.
But his research starts to tell a very different story. Yeah. Right, and he's like digging in the archives.
Yeah, he is.
Spending years.
Yeah, meticulous.
Going through these documents. But what's he finding?
What he finds is actually evidence of planned expulsions.
Wow.
Systematic efforts to drive Palestinians from their homes.
So like a direct contradiction to everything he had been taught.
Absolutely. And this is what leads him to write his book.
Right.
The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine.
The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine.
Which I think really becomes a major turning point.
Yeah.
Both in his career, but also I think in the broader understanding of this conflict.
So that book comes out in 2006.
2006, right?
But it's the culmination of years.
Years and years.
Of research, of grappling with this stuff.
Absolutely.
And what's amazing is that he doesn't shy away from sharing his findings.
Yeah.
Even though he knows it's going to cause a huge backlash.
Right.
It's like a testament to his commitment to truth.
I think so.
And also just his courage.
Absolutely.
To speak out, even when he knows he's going to face like intense opposition.
Yeah. And he does.
Oh, he does.
I mean, he's labeled a traitor by some colleagues.
Right.
Faces threats from the authorities at Haifa University.
It's almost unimaginable.
It is.
Being condemned for uncovering historical facts.
Yep. The truth is somehow treasonous.
Right.
Which is really disturbing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, something really interesting happens.
What's that?
He starts to gain immense popularity among his students.
Wow.
Both Arab and Israeli students.
Interesting. So, like, the younger generation is...
It seems like it.
More receptive to his message.
Much more open to this idea of dialogue and challenging the status quo.
Yeah, and so that kind of highlights this really interesting divide in Israeli society.
Right.
Like, you have the establishment reacting one way.
Right.
And then the students are like, wait a second.
Yeah.
There's something to this.
There's something here that we need to pay attention to.
And of course, then you have the Second Intifada.
Right, which erupts in 2000.
Right.
And that further intensifies
the free thing.
The pressure on Pappe
Absolutely. He becomes a direct target of the government at this point.
Wow.
Even starts to receive death threats. This period is really a crucible for him.
Yeah.
And there's this chilling anecdote in the interview where he talks about returning from a trip abroad with his family.
Yeah.
And they arrive at Ben Gurion Airport.
Right.
And, they see his picture up on the screen.
Right.
But it's not a welcoming image.
Right.
It's his photo with a target superimposed on it.
Wow, that's terrifying.
It is.
To be so publicly marked as an enemy.
To be basically told you are a threat.
Yeah.
Simply for speaking the truth.
Right, and to put
and your family at risk like that.
That's intense.
It's a real testament to his conviction.
Yeah.
But in the midst of all this adversity,
he finds solace and support within the Palestinian community in Israel.
Right.
The 48 Arabs, as they're sometimes called.
The 48 Arabs, okay.
And they embrace him.
Wow.
They understand what it means to be marginalized, to have your history erased.
Right.
And they welcome him.
It's almost like the shared experience of oppression created a really powerful bond.
Right, this kind of solidarity
in
the face of a system that was seeking to silence them.
And this is where we really see that transition from simply questioning Zionism to actively opposing it.
Right.
It's not just about uncovering the truth about the past.
It's about challenging the entire system built on this distorted history.
Right. So in this first part of our deep dive, we've kind of traced Pappe's journey from this childhood steeped in Zionist ideology to his disillusionment fueled by research and personal encounters. This sets the stage, I think, for understanding his eventual embrace of anti-Zionism.
Right.
A stance that would make him both a controversial figure and a leading voice in the struggle for Palestinian liberation.
Yeah, and in the next part, we're going to unpack his critique of global Israel and explore his arguments for a decolonized future.
I'm interested to hear this.
Yeah, delving into the complexities of what a just and sustainable solution might look like. So stay with us.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
There's a lot more to uncover.
We left off with Pappe facing some pretty intense backlash for his work, finding support in unexpected places.
Right.
But he doesn't stop at just uncovering the past.
Yeah.
He really pushes us to think about the forces that are maintaining the status quo.
Yeah.
And he calls this global Israel.
Global Israel.
Yeah.
Which is a really insightful concept.
It is.
Because it moves beyond just looking at the Israeli government and forces us to consider this whole...
the wider network, wider network of actors who are actually benefiting from the current situation.
Yeah, who have a stake in this in some way.
So it's not just about ideology, then?
It goes beyond ideology. I mean, ideology is certainly a part of it.
Okay.
But Pappe really points to, you have multinational corporations that are profiting from the occupation.
Yeah.
You have politicians both in Israel and abroad who are using the conflict for their own gain.
Right.
You even have some right-wing groups in other countries who see Israel as kind of a solution to what they perceive as problems in their own countries.
Wow.
So it's a really tangled web.
It is. It's like a tangled web of
motivations.
Yeah, of motivations.
Some economic.
Right.
Some political.
Right.
Some rooted in prejudice.
Wow.
So it's a really, I think, complex picture.
Yeah, it makes you realize how deeply entrenched these power structures really are.
Absolutely.
And then on the flip side, you have, global Palestine.
Global Palestine, yeah.
Which is this whole movement of individuals, organizations, even governments who are pushing for Palestinian rights.
Right.
Self-determination.
Yeah, and this is a movement that I think Pappe acknowledges has grown significantly in recent years.
Which is encouraging.
It is.
Right, to see that kind of global solidarity emerging.
It's heartening to see people kind of waking up to this issue.
But this is where it gets interesting.
Here's where I think Pappe's analysis gets really sharp.
Okay.
He argues that global Palestine risks becoming a kind of feel-good movement.
Interesting.
Unless it can translate that support into tangible political pressure.
So it's not enough to just hold rallies.
It's not enough to just sort of,
and express sympathy.
Express sympathy or, tweet about it.
Okay.
He sees a need for more strategic thinking.
Okay.
A more unified front.
Right.
That can actually effectively challenge global Israel.
So it's about being more effective in their...
It's about being smart about it.
Okay.
And he uses the example of, the pro-Israel lobby. which, despite a lot of internal disagreements, has been incredibly effective.
Yeah, they've managed to exert a lot of influence.
Right.
And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that they're very good at organizing.
They're very good at, even though they might disagree on certain things, they're able to kind of coalesce around common goals.
So what does Pappe suggest that global Palestine?
I think one of the key things he emphasizes is setting aside some of the ideological differences and focusing on those
common goals,
shared objectives.
You're finding ways to work together, even if it means
compromising.
Compromising on certain points in order to achieve greater impact.
Exactly.
That sounds incredibly difficult, though.
It is, given the complexity of the issues.
And the deep divisions that exist.
Situation. Yeah.
I mean, is that even realistic?
I think Pappe would argue that it's essential.
Okay.
If the movement wants to move beyond symbolic gestures.
Yeah.
And actually start to shift the balance of power.
So it's this shift from reactive outrage to proactive strategy.
Yeah.
Which makes sense in theory.
Right.
But seems very hard.
Yeah. Much easier said than done.
To actually put into practice.
But one of the things he really emphasizes, and I think this is key, is the need for a clear articulation of what a free Palestine actually means.
Right.
Because it's easy to rally behind a slogan.
Right.
But translating that into a concrete vision for the future requires a lot more work.
It's okay, we know what we don't want.
Right.
But what do we want to build in its place?
That's a great way to put it.
And it's not always clear.
And I think Pappe is, critical of what he sees as a kind of vagueness around this term.
Okay.
People will talk about from the river to the sea.
Right.
But they often shy away from explaining what that actually means.
In terms of
land rights.
Okay.
Citizenship governance.
Right.
The whole range of complexities that come with decolonization.
And he's saying you have to actually grapple with these questions.
You have to grapple with it.
Yeah.
And he argues that having that clear vision is crucial not only for mobilizing support, but also for engaging those who are hesitant or even fearful of what a free Palestine might entail.
So it's about addressing people's fears.
Absolutely.
And showing them that
a decolonized future.
It's not something to be afraid of.
Doesn't have to be something to be afraid of.
Yeah.
He even suggests that ultimately a decolonized future could benefit Jewish Israelis as well.
Interesting.
Allowing them to shed the burdens and contradictions of the current system.
That's a pretty...
It's a bold statement.
Yeah, a pretty radical stance.
It is.
But it does highlight, I think, his belief in the possibility of a future where Palestinians and Israelis can coexist peacefully and equitably.
And this vision is something that we need to explore further.
And that's what we'll do in the final part of this deep dive.
Yeah.
We'll shift our focus to explore Pappe's insights on the role of global solidarity and what we as individuals who aren't directly involved in the conflict can do to contribute to a more just future.
So it's about moving beyond simply understanding the complexities.
It's about taking action.
To actually taking action.
Yeah.
I'm eager to hear what he has to say about that. We've been talking about Ilan Pappe's ideas about global forces at play.
Right.
This global Israel concept and the need to articulate a vision for a decolonized future.
But what does all of this actually mean for people like us?
Right.
Who want to be allies in the struggle for Palestinian liberation?
What can we actually do?
Yeah, what can we do?
I think one of the most powerful things that Pappe says is that allyship begins with understanding our own complicity.
Okay.
And he specifically challenges those of us who are in Europe to confront our historical responsibility for the Palestinian tragedy.
It's a heavy topic.
It is.
But an important one.
Yeah, he's essentially saying we can't ignore how our own country's actions in the past, especially during the colonial era, contributed to the conflict we see today.
And he's not letting us off easy.
He doesn't.
He critiques current European policies as well.
He argues that they often prioritize self-interest over justice, ultimately benefiting Israel at the expense of Palestinian rights.
So it's really a call.
is.
For reckoning.
It's a call for a much deeper reckoning with
how our past
continues to shape the present.
Right. We are not neutral observers.
No.
Our histories, our economies, our political systems.
They're all intertwined.
Are all intertwined with what's happening in Palestine.
Absolutely.
And so what does that mean for how we should act?
Well, I think that awareness should lead to action.
Right.
Pappe outlines some specific ways we can translate our solidarity into meaningful change.
Give me some examples.
Well, one of the key ideas he emphasizes is connecting the Palestinian struggle to broader movements for justice.
So it's about recognizing the shared threads.
Right. Those shared threads of oppression and resistance. That unite people across borders.
And he's saying, like, look, we've seen these massive demonstrations in recent years.
Exactly.
Where people have come together.
From all walks of life.
You know, to protest against racism, economic inequality, climate change, you name it.
And he sees this growing interconnectedness as a source of hope.
Okay. So the more we recognize that these struggles are linked, the more powerful
our collective action becomes.
Our collective action becomes,
It's like building a web of solidarity.
Right.
Where each thread strengthens the others.
And so injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Right.
We can't be siloed in our activism.
And within that web of solidarity, I think Pappe really urges us to focus on holding our own governments accountable.
Right. So it's not enough to just
sort of
change hearts and minds.
Have these abstract conversations.
You need to demand policy changes.
Absolutely.
Right.
You need to leverage our democratic power to push for more just policies towards Palestine.
So things like boycotts?
He talks about boycotts.
Sanctions. Consistently speaking out against human rights violations.
Right, making it politically costly for our governments to ignore the Palestinian cause.
So we have a responsibility to make noise.
We do.
To keep the pressure on.
Right, to make sure that this issue doesn't fade into the background.
And it all comes back to that question.
Right.
What kind of future are we striving for?
What kind of future do we want?
Pappe reminds us that true decolonization requires more than just
dismantling the old system.
It's about building something new.
Building something new. Something just. Something sustainable. That benefits everyone.
And
that's a project that I think requires all of us to participate.
Regardless of where we come from.
Regardless of our background. He even goes so far as to say that he believes the Zionist project is ultimately unsustainable.
Okay. So that's a pretty provocative statement.
Is that pessimistic, or is that a kind of radical call for imagining something entirely new?
What do you think a decolonized future could look like?
I think that's the question we all need to be grappling with.
Yeah, I think Pappe's story is really a powerful example.
It is.
Of how personal transformation can lead to broader social change.
Absolutely.
You know, he went from being a Zionist to an anti-Zionist.
And he didn't do it lightly.
He did it through
years of research.
Personal encounters.
Really grappling with the complexities of this issue.
It's inspiring, but it's also a challenge.
It is.
You know, he's calling on us to confront uncomfortable truths.
Absolutely.
To step outside our comfort zone.
And to take action.
Yeah, and to take action in whatever ways we can.
It's not an easy path.
It's not.
But it's a necessary one.
It's a necessary one.
If we want to create a more just and equitable world.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, we hope it's given you some new perspectives.
Into Ilan Pappe's life and ideas.
And maybe even sparked some ideas.
Yeah.
How you can get involved.
In the struggle for Palestinian liberation.
Absolutely.